This is Kevin Collins with Home Theater Forum. We're here at the last day of CEDIA at the Antennas Direct booth with Richard, the president of Antennas Direct.
Yes, thanks for having me. A lot of people are surprised 2011, one of the fastest growing categories in home theater accessories is off-air television antennas. And a lot of people thought that over-the-air was dead. But something funny came along in the last couple of years. One was the digital transition, and the American broadcasters spent $15 billion upgrading their transmission facilities, and the American public gets this for free, high definition with much lower compression rates. The other thing that caught me by surprise was the advent of Hulu and Netflix and other broadband providers have given people the rationale they've been looking for to end an unhappy relationship with a cable provider. And I wouldn't have predicted that Hulu would help drive antenna sales, but we're actually have double the sales that we did this time last year. And so it's a perfect storm of this new digital content that's available free over the air, plus the premium content that's available through over-the-top broadband video providers.
That's very interesting. I have ATSC for myself at house, along with satellite and cable. I'm kind of crazy in that way, just because there's certain types of content that I can get. But I always prefer watching my locals over ATSC because of the picture quality. Can you kind of give us some additional information on how you see it on being the picture quality over ATSC versus cable or satellite?
Yeah, I mean, in the defense of the cable and satellite companies, they're trying to fit 20 pounds of potatoes in a 3-pound sack, and they keep adding new services, new content, but the satellite transponders aren't getting any bigger. The cable lines aren't doubling in capacity. So what they have to do is they have to throttle back the bit rates a little bit on the data streams. And so what might have started out originally at a 20 megabits per second stream, by the time it reaches the household, it might be 4, 5, or 6 megabits per second. And so really now you're at sort of a quasi HD, and they're counting that most people won't know the difference. Now over-the-air HD is, depending on multicasting, can be anywhere from 15 to 19 megabits per second, and just as a comparison, Blu-ray is about 22. So we're at a bit rate that's really approaching close to what you can get from Blu-ray, and best part about it is there's no charge, and it's the only way for a lot of people to realize the investment they've made in some very expensive home theater gear.
The other interesting thing that I've seen is, even the CEA has gone out and kind of said studies that people aren't using ATSC and they're trying to steal the bandwidth and use it for mobile. What are you guys doing to, around that to kind of raise awareness that this is a really valuable asset for the American public?
Yeah, we find these studies pretty amusing because since we're struggling to keep up with production for all the demand there is for antennas. But we've actually have made trips to Capitol Hill. We've shared our sales statistics with members of Congress and the Senate Commerce Committee. We've also visited multiple visits to the FCC, again sharing with them our growth and success story to certainly a very skeptical FCC. A lot of the decisions that are being made in Washington obviously are not for the benefit of the viewing public. They're really to advance some political agenda. And the data that they're using to show that over-the-air is on the wane is actually they're taking statistics from the waning days of analog, when in fact it was in decline for 30 years. But consider the possibility that when you spend $15 billion to improve the quality of the product, don't you think maybe the needle might just move just a little bit? And on the other side, on the receive side, we've spent millions making antennas more powerful and more reliable, and most importantly, more compact and aesthetic, which has broadened consumer acceptance. And think about the DirecTV example. In the 70s and 80s, C-band satellite dishes were popular just really with the enthusiast community due to the size of the antenna. A 3-meter dish wasn't very palatable in most neighborhood associations. When DirecTV came out and with their technology, they were able to get the dish down to 18 inches, what happened? Satellite viewership went from 50,000 people nationwide to 20, 30 million practically, with the space of 5 or 6 years. Why? Because the antenna was smaller. And that's what's happening in the antenna industry, is we're making antennas a fraction of the size they would have been in your grandparents' day. And now it's something that people who've never bought an antenna before are saying, wow, this isn't what I thought it would be.
Can you show us some of what that shrinking technology looks like on your antennas?
We can, this is actually right here our Clearstream line of indoor antennas. This is the Micron, and the equivalent antenna, in the 60s or 70s would have been 10 times its size. It has a range of about 35 miles, but a form factor of only 8 by 10 inches. And we have antenna arrays that have ranges of up to 70 miles up here on our Clearstream family, and still, you're talking something that's 20 inches tall. In the days of I Love Lucy, you may have needed an antenna that was 14 foot across. And why that might be acceptable to an enthusiast, the average consumer is not going to degrade the aesthetics of a very expensive house with a 15-foot antenna array, and that generally limits the market opportunities. So we can make something in a 10-inch form factor and take out 95% of the size while making the antenna higher gain, more resistant to interference, and a higher degree of reliability and consistency, much like people expect from pay television.
Now, is this antenna designed to be in the house, or?
This is an indoor antenna. This is actually believe it or not, it's our Clearstream 1 outdoor antenna that has been repackaged in a more aesthetic enclosure. So we have our patented Clearstream element in this front cell, and then we actually, although it looks like an aesthetic appendage, it's a tuning reflector to match. It's for impedance matching. So the energy that's received by the driven element isn't actually burnt up at the transformer due to the impedance losses. So what actually is received by the element actually makes it onto the cable, which has been a problem historically because the modeling software wasn't advanced enough to really get all of the mismatch equations worked out. It was too computationally intensive to do by hand. Now there are simulation tools where we can run through thousands and thousands of iterations in a matter of days and work out just the perfect formula for tuning to the target digital frequencies and then maximizing efficiency. And that's why we're able to make them smaller, is because we don't have to start with the largest arrays. Now when we've got something that's 97% efficient, we don't have to start with a higher raw gain, because since the majority of the signal is making it to the cable, we can start with an electrically smaller package.
This kind of reminds me of, kind of dates me a little bit, the old rabbit ears that we used to put on a TV. I mean, when I was growing up, we had rabbit ears, and then we had a huge honking antenna up on the roof with the rotor, and you'd sit there and turn the thing, and you'd wait for the station to come in. This is a lot smaller, obviously, than those old rabbit ears, and obviously you said it picks up better. But my recollection of rabbit ears is that anything inside still had an issue. Is there any, special things that people on Home Theater Forum, if they bought something like this on placement inside?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate its abilities. There is no magic antenna. Indoor reception will always be less ideal than an outside installation, because building materials are going to attenuate the signals. They're gonna weaken the signals, and then metallic surfaces or in the walls or on the house can potentially present reflections. So if an outdoor installation is not possible, we suggest to get the antenna as high as practical, but at least as narrow a window as possible. Glass is very transmissive of the signal. And if you can at least get it, somewhere in proximity to glass, and if that glass is hopefully on the same side of the building as the transmitting towers, that helps quite a bit. And we also suggest try to keep the cable run, under 175 feet, because you can lose up to 30% of the signal for every 100 foot of coax cable.
Is there any special kinds of coax cable that people should look at if they have to do longer runs?
We like RG6. There really isn't a whole lot of difference in loss between some of the fancy gold-plated cables and extra shielding is nice, but it doesn't actually prevent any additional loss. It might prevent interference. So we don't suggest RG59. That does provide more resistance, and the cost difference isn't that much anyways. If possible, though, and we really still do, even though we offer indoor antennas, if you live in a valley, or if you've got terrain obstacles between you and the transmitting towers, we highly encourage people to consider using an outdoor antenna, and also to keep in mind antennas, again, like I said earlier, can be a tenth of the size that they would have been in your grandparents' day. And if worse comes to worse, you could at least put them in your attic. And that way you're only going through one layer of roof deck rather than having to punch through all those building interior walls. And elevation can help because you're now clearing hills or mountains that might be between you and the transmitting source.
So since we're kind of talking about outdoor antennas, I have that antenna, the big honking one, up on my roof, and I'm not that far from the transmitting, but I have lots of trees, and I'm kind of on the backside of a hill. And I was talking to you that I had to turn it at a 90-degree angle,
yeah.
And you said, "Oh, okay," and you gave some tips around that. I wonder if you could share with other people on. Just because you have it inside or outside, you might have to do some weird movements of it and stuff like that to actually get it to behave properly. And maybe if my house was 5 feet over, it would be a different issue. Can you there's some rules of thumb that?
Yeah, this is where we start getting into the black art of antenna installations. There's a perception that broadcast television has a perfectly consistent and circular radiation pattern. And it's not. There can be, one side of town may get absolutely brilliant signal strength, and an equidistant but opposite side of town may suffer. And terrain, especially in an area where there's lots of challenging terrain, variable heights, there will be null spots in the signal. There'll be dead zones. And there will also be, depending on the way the hills are laid out or the terrain features, there can be weird reflection characteristics, and a lot of times multipath, a fancy word for reflected signals, can actually be a larger problem than a weak signal. And in the analog days, it was a primitive system, but it was very forgiving and very tolerant. So with multipath, you might have gotten a little ghosting or something, but the image was still watchable. With digital reception, the American ATSC format is not very forgiving of reflected signals, meaning another set of data packets that's arriving later than the primary set. And in layman's terms, the tuner just gets flustered when it gets presented with multiple data packets and ends up just blanking out. And so what may be required, especially if you're in an area that has severe multipath, you may have to do a number of things, repositioning antennas, and sometimes it's like you said, it's 5 feet up or down or left or right. It's actually sometimes going to an antenna that has a completely different geometry. So maybe an antenna with a narrower beam pattern might be more appropriate for that area. Sometimes even the use of attenuators, believe it or not, can help. By dialing the signal down, what it's doing is lowering the threshold in which the tuners can even see the reflections, since a reflected signal wouldn't necessarily be weaker than the primary signal. So there can be some trial and error required.
Now, I shared my experience with you that when it snows, which is rare in Seattle, that then all my signals came in great. And I thought that was because I was getting more reflectivity, but you corrected me and said actually it's because it was probably getting rid of the multipath by absorbing the signals.
I'm theorizing that the snow is having a dampening factor, and it's reducing the reflectivity. But rather than allowing the signals to ricochet off of whatever reflective surface, it's actually acting as a sort of a deadening agent and dampening the reflections. And maybe then all you're seeing is the primary signal. And it's very hard with digital to troubleshoot because again, it's on or off. It's hard unlike analog, where you can kind of troubleshoot weak signal versus reflected signal by the nature of the degradation. You have to theorize. Attenuation, a lot of times, especially when you're less than 15 miles from the transmitter, can be much more of a problem. And the irony is our customer service lines get more calls for help from people that live 2 to 3 miles from the transmitting towers than people who live 20 or 30 miles. And the reason being is somebody who lives 30 miles away probably isn't seeing a lot of reflections because the signals at that distance are probably not getting reflected at quite the degree to the guy who's living in the shadow of the transmitting tower. So it can be, I can see how people can get frustrated, but if you have a little bit of patience and can try placement in different areas along your roof line, certainly the benefits are free HD, and especially now in major markets, maybe up to 40 or 50 channels. Most people are very happy with the investment they made in the time.
Well, I can attest for the picture quality that I see, because I always watch stuff either in my home theater with 8-foot widescreen or on a 65-inch rear projection TV or a variety of different HDTV, LCD displays. So I can appreciate the better picture quality than what I'll see equivalently over my cable coming in or my satellite. So I actually have those comparisons where I can do it, and you can see a lot more pixelation and compression artifacts in there too.